All right, well, thank you. It's good to see your smiling faces tonight.
Likewise.
And looking forward to what God will hopefully say to us this evening through his word. Tough chapters. You look at people and you say, how in the world could they do that? And yet, you look around and it keeps on happening. And the scary part is that some of these things can happen to us as well if we're not paying attention.
Yeah.
So let's open with a word of prayer, and then Jeff, Deb, could I ask you to just open us in a simple word of prayer?
Certainly. The Lord be with you.
And
Also with you.
Lord, as we get together today to try to discern your word and how that words from 2,500 years ago are applicable to our lives today, may we continue to move towards the path that leads to pleasing you in any way we can. In Christ's name we ask it.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Very nice.
That's great. Okay, well, we're in chapter 15 of 2 Kings, 2 Kings, and we'll pick it up in verse 8.
15:8.
15:8, what did I say?
15.
15 verse 8,
I'm
yeah.
gonna start reading.
Yeah, so we'll just read the 8 down through 12 about Zechariah.
Okay, sure. Okay, in the 30th year of Azariah, the king of Judah, Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 6 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his father had done. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah. He attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. The other events of Zechariah's reign are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. Your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation.
Interesting way of implementing succession of rulers.
Yeah.
But we've been talking last week about Uzziah or Azariah, who was king of Judah and a godly king until the latter part of his life, and then hubris set in and arrogance, and he crossed the line and thought he had freedom to do whatever he wanted to do, stepped into a role as priest that he should never have, and paid the price for it. But now we come back to swing back to the north. So in the last couple of chapters, we're just going back and forth between north and south. And we're introduced here to Zechariah. How is he described?
So he did evil in the eyes of the Lord.
Like his forebearers.
Yes.
6 months wonder.
It also sounds like he had a lousy security team.
Secret Service.
Just like Trump a couple weeks ago. It's interesting, maybe to his peers, he might not have been doing evil, but in whose eyes?
In the Lord's eyes.
The Lord's eyes. And I think, that's ultimately how we have to measure our behavior, our attitudes, isn't it? What's acceptable socially, as far as God is concerned, may be very unacceptable. And how to discern that. Interestingly, it says he did evil as his predecessors had done. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. How important is influence, modeling?
Yes, enormous.
It's a theme that keeps coming around, caused them to, the previous one, didn't turn away from the other one who caused them to do evil. And that keeps coming up, So influence is a big deal.
Fruit doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just came out a couple of weeks ago with a study about people in this country, if they'll be successful, and if they'll be financially stable and all the rest of it. And what it was all based on is if they lived in an area, even if it was a ghetto type area and people worked, that the kids would then have a model,
Wow.
and this is where the modeling comes in, to do the same thing, and they had a great chance for success. So it's extremely important. If you look at the problems we have today, it's because of this, you know, the forefathers, their father, the father, the grandfather before them, and great-grandfather, all the rest of them, weren't very good models.
If they're around at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, fathers missing or it's epidemic.
Remember Jesus' words when he talked about if you cause one of these little children to stumble? Remember that?
Yeah.
What was his point?
We're to be good role models.
I don't think there's no private sin. I mean, it affects people no matter what. It's like a cancer, it's a contagion. You don't realize how it's affecting others until it's already happened.
When you were growing up, were you ever in a situation where because others were doing it, you thought it must be okay?
I've never heard that happen before.
But social pressure is there, isn't it? And the power of influence, models. You know, I'm sure most of you have been watching some, perhaps, or following the Olympics. But so many of the backstories, it talks about a person who came into their life at a critical point and said, you can do better, you can do this if you set your mind to it, and coached and helped and supported them. At the same time, Jesus makes it clear, like when he said, if you cause one of these children to stumble and fall, it's better for you, what's the word?
Millstone.
Millstone tied
Millstone
around your
around your
neck and tossed into the sea. There's serious consequences for when we model and others fall because of our example or go into error and sin. And that's why judgment is harsher on leaders, because they have influence. And leadership is basically influencing people to go in a certain direction and or serve your cause or your rationale. And teachers as well. Why did Jesus go after the Pharisees, scribes?
Well, they were the teachers of Israel.
Exactly.
They were the ultimate role models.
Remember what he said to Nicodemus in John chapter 3 when they had that midnight meeting?
That he needed to be born again.
Right?
He needed to be
Yeah.
born again.
And remember, Nicodemus said, what are you talking about? How can this happen? And remember Jesus' response
Yeah,
to him?
Jesus said, you're a teacher of Israel and you don't know this
You
stuff?
don't need these things? Yeah, here you are, a teacher, and I'm talking about the fundamental spiritual laws, and you're clueless, you know? And so it's an awesome thing to think, who am I influencing? I'm reading a book here called Lifelong Faith. Lifelong Faith. It's basically an integrated approach to faith development in a local church, from children up to adults. And there was in this one section about, how do you help families? How do you raise godly families? What are the resources? How can you do this? And it's obvious thing. They say the most powerful influence on a child's life are its parents. How many of you had perfect parents growing up? How many of you were
Question, how many
perfect
of you had
parents?
parents? That he had.
Yeah, there's a sense in which, that's where faith is formed, usually, in a Christian home, and if it's not just what you talk about or go to church, it's what's modeled and practiced.
What you do speaks louder than what you say,
Exactly. What are
especially
the-
to young kids.
I was watching an interview this afternoon for the men's gymnastic, and his name is Brody, anyway.
Yeah, the guy,
Huh?
the male.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And he-
gymnast, yeah.
and his dad taught him to be humble. He says, you don't need to talk about how good you are. You need to show them
Show it.
how good you are. And I think a lot of my moral formation came through my father, who had standards and ethics up to here. Poor man, only went to the 7th grade, had to go to work, support his family, and yet he had such a concern to do what was right, you know. And I didn't always follow that, but I certainly saw it in action, you know, and radically shaped my life. But here we see Zechariah, he just, you know, like father, like son, like the son before that, and on and on it went. But how long did his reign last?
2 months.
6 months. 6 months.
And it kind of backfired,
Next time we
and
have
what
it.
happened to him?
Go back then.
It's almost like God says, here's your 6 months to fulfill his promise, and says, now you're out of here.
Yeah. It's interesting, we read in verse 10, this person by the name of Shallum, it says he conspired against Zechariah, and he didn't do it in the dark, in a back alley. He attacked him in front of the people. We don't know what the setting was and how this happened, and assassinated him and said, I'm king. And then how long did he last?
1 month.
He hit the ground running, he started
Yeah.
sitting right from the start.
Yeah, right. It's a sad, and this is the king of Israel, and this is, you know, when you think of what God had intended and what he warned Israel about. Remember when we started Samuel? And Samuel said to the people who they were demanding a king, you don't know what you're asking for. And
Last sentence of this
Moses
is
had
pretty
said the
interesting.
same thing in Deuteronomy. You know, I know you want a king to be like every other nation, but it's gonna hurt you in the long run. Don't do it. Let the Lord be your king. But neither Zechariah nor Shallum knew that, understood that. And so it was interesting, in verse 12, would someone reread that again?
So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. Your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation.
And so the 4th generation had come, and now the end. And so God had predicted to Jehu, who was used by God to deal with Ahaz and his dynasty, to bring judgment on it finally. But Jehu had his own problem. But anyway, and so God says, this is the outcome if you follow this path. So let's go on and read
So,
about
well,
another
Can
Shallum.
can I ask a question?
Sure.
Of the, okay, so it says this descendants will sit on the throne of Israel for the 4th generation. We know this one wasn't very good. Who was the generations were the ones before him good
Yeah.
leaders?
No, they were.
So he fulfilled the promise to all
He
bad
said-
kings?
He said, I've gotta cut your dynasty short.
That's what I mean.
That was part of the judgment, and it took, he allowed it to go for 4 generations, and then that's it. Hoping for something better, it didn't happen.
And none of them were any
None
good?
were good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like Jehu did like 1 or 2 good things, the rest of his career was lousy.
It didn't rain long ago. Jehu was 28 years, Jehoaz 17, Jehoash 16, and Jeroboam 41.
Yeah, yeah.
And these last 2 guys, 6 months and 1 month.
I mean.
But Shallum wasn't of that generation, right? He wasn't of that line,
No.
because
Now, these were self-appointed, they weren't, none of the kings, later kings, were from the Davidic line. They are, you know, they appointed themselves, were appointed as military leaders or whatever their background. None of these were in the Davidic line.
well, what about Judah? And Judah, was there anybody Davidic?
You mean the southern kingdom?
The southern kingdom, yeah.
Yeah, no, they were all in the line of David,
They were all
because that's what God had
Yes.
promised
Yes.
to David. So let's go on to look at Shallum, another king of Israel, and let's read that from 13 down to verse 16.
Shallum, the son of Jabesh, began to reign in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned 1 month in Samaria. Then Menahem, the son of Gadai, came up from Tirzah and came to Samaria, and he struck down Shallum, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria, and put him to death and reigned in his place. Now the rest of the deeds of Shalom and the conspiracy that he made, behold, they were written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel. At that time, Menahem sacked Tipsha and all who were in its territory from Tirzah on, because they did not open it to him. Therefore he sacked it, and he ripped open all the women in it who were pregnant. That's pretty Herod-like. That deal. Eliminate
You
the
notice the pattern with
competition.
these kings of Israel, that they progressively become like all the other kings of surrounding nations, doing the same kind of things that Assyria or Babylon or other of these despots out there would do. And this is supposed to be, you know, over God's people, taking care and counting us. So, it was short-lived,
Hmm.
and again, here's a self-appointed king. And he got there by assassinating his predecessor.
At this point, they're just mobsters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just, they're doing what the world does. That's the models that they're following. So let's go on and read about another king
And there's
in
more.
Israel from verse 17 down through 22.
In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, son of Gadi, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria 10 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. During his entire reign, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Then Bul, king of Assyria, invaded the land, and Menahem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthen his own hold on the kingdom. Menahem exacted this money from Israel. Every wealthy person had to contribute 50 shekels of silver to be given to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and stayed in the land no longer. As for the other events of Menahem's reign, and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Menahem rested with his ancestors, and Pekahiah, his son, succeeded him as king.
What did you notice about this king of Israel?
He lasted longer than 6 months.
That's because he was paying everybody off.
Yeah. So what was his strategy for preserving Israel?
He taxed the rich and gave it to his enemies.
At this point, Assyria becomes a world power very strongly, and they end up to is the ones wipe out the 10 tribes now. They are the monarch Israel is almost in the end. This is last year, so we are now in the 730s, and the 722 was the end of the 10 tribes of the north. So Tiglat, the name of this is Tiglat-Pileser, they give a different name. And he took a lot of people from that area to Assyria by that time. And the remnant they stay, this king pay for him move out of there, he pay to survive.
So this is the first, as Joe said, this is the first of 3 invasions by Assyria. And it's 735, and by 722, the third invasion will happen, and that's the end of the northern kingdom. They're taken away into captivity. Basically, they disappear. And Assyria's policy, as opposed to Babylon's, was to remove people from their homeland and bring others back into it. And that way, it was a way of preventing future rebellions of these people, you know. At the same time, the northern kingdom at this point became what we call a vassal state. In other words, they were subordinate. They were paying taxes and tribute to Syria just to stay alive, to stay in business. But what does it say about the king, the King Menahem's strategy? What was he depending upon for their survival,
Money.
Money
Protection.
from the wealthy people.
Yeah,
as opposed to what?
fighting.
God.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Instead of looking to the Lord for deliverance and help. Yeah. considered it apparently. He said, I just paid these guys off and hope for the best. And in the end, it didn't work. It cost him a lot of money and eventually their lives. So let's go on. One more, pick a higher.
I'll try this one. 23.
23 down to 26.
Okay. In the 50th year of Azariah, the king of Judah, Pekahiah, the son of Menahem, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned 2 years. Pekahiah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. One of his chief officers, Pekah, son of Remaliah, conspired against him, taking 50 men of Gilead with him. He assassinated Pekahiah along with Argob and Erech in the citadel of the royal palace at Samaria. So Pekah killed Pekahiah and succeeded him as king. The other events of Pekahiah's reign and all he did are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel.
Again, how did this transition from one king to the other? How did it happen?
Like the rest.
Another assassination.
Yeah,
A
another.
different Pekka order?
Anybody who would name their kid Argob, that's sad.
I know.
It's important, like our Lord used Jeroboam, the first king, when, after Solomon, the north and the split, so the first king, so instead of, was the first one to put two altars, one in Bethel, another one in it, and bring two golden calves. And after it becomes the model of idolatry to the end of the
That's
north.
right. That's a good point, John. As you notice back in verse 24, it said, Pekahiah, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam. And Jeroboam, as Joe said, was who? He was the what king of Israel?
He was
When
the
they
first-
split? He was the first
First
king
king of
in the northern kingdom of Israel. And
So he influenced the whole army.
he set the tone, the pace for all that was to come. And as Joe reminded us, he introduced Baal worship and so forth, not to totally replace Jehovah, witness of Jehovah in the true sense, but to supplement it. They were both there. They mingled these two religious systems in which didn't work as far as God was concerned. And that sin set the course for several hundred years to follow. Anything else that you notice from these, or any other principles or things that come out of this when we read about Pekahiah? Interesting, he was assassinated where?
In the citadel, the royal palace.
What is a citadel?
Tower?
Supposedly a protected fortress.
In an inner city, it's the most secure, supposedly safe place. And here he was thinking nothing can hurt him, and that's where he got assasinated.
There was a coup d'etat
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
chapel.
Yeah,
Is
so-
is the book of annals kind of like the book of names? It's not a real book?
Yeah, it was a record. Every country, every kingdom, Babylonian, Assyrian, and Medo-Persians, they have found in historical, archaeological evidence of some of those annals from those different kingdoms. And they talk about in the year whatever, so-and-so happened, they conquered this land, or, this happened, that happened. So it was basically a description of what took place during the reign of that particular king. And sometimes, as Lyndon picked up in his Bible, they're called Chronicles. But that's different, as I mentioned, from First and Second Chronicles, which was written later. So they were annals, yeah, they were records.
So there were many of them,
Yeah,
not just one book of,
we know of at least 2 or 3 are mentioned.
Okay.
Different accounts that were kept, and I don't quite know what
Okay.
the big difference was between them. So now we come to, it just keeps getting better and better, we come to Pekah, king of Israel. And let's pick it up in verse 27. Someone read that section, down to verse 31.
In the 52nd year, King Azariah of Judah Pekah, son of Remaliah, began to reign over Israel and Samaria. He reigned 20 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to sin. Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
In the days of King Pekah of Israel, King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria came and captured Hijon, Abelreth-Macherah, Jonash, Kedesh,
Big mistake.
Bezor, Gilead, and Galilee, all of the land of Naphtali. And he carried the people captive to Assyria. Then Hosea, son of Elah, made a conspiracy against Pekah, the son of Remaliah, attacking him and killed him. He reigned in place of him in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. Now the rest of the acts of Pekah and all that he did are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel.
Very good. We see someone else following in his father's footsteps.
Is this the son of the man who we heard about yesterday got killed by David?
Beersheba.
Uriah the Hittite.
That was a couple hundred years
Yeah,
earlier.
Oh, okay, but maybe different Zed in it. But that was Uzziah nonetheless.
No, it was
Uzziah was the king of Judah, the
Azariah.
southern kingdom. Azariah is also called Uzziah, same thing.
Okay.
It's confusing, I know, but it's just like, you'll find a lot of
Just
Davids and
trying to
a lot of
put together.
Lyndons and a lot of Larrys in history at different times. So names pop up and you're not quite sure who they belong to at which period.
We are in the 30 year at this point, and the other ones was way before
So-
the temple.
So far, 2 invasions of Assyria have happened, and the axe is about to fall shortly. But now we jump back to the southern kingdom, Jotham, where we discover is the son of Uzziah or Azariah. And let's read about him in verses 32 down to the end of the chapter.
Okay. In the second year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Joshua, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. As for the other events of Jotham's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? In those days, the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, against Judah. Jotham rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David, the city of his father. And Ahaz, his son, succeeded him as king.
Okay, thank you. And so here we see a different story. How is Jotham, Uzziah's son, how is he described?
So he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord.
You know,
I guess his mom was a daughter of a priest, priest Zadok.
Now, what makes the difference, you wonder?
His upbringing, came from a religious family that,
Yeah, Uzziah was a good king too.
Yeah, right, he was. He got in trouble towards the end, but Jotham. It's interesting here in his description is fairly brief in Kings, just, you know, these 8 verses or so. But what is I'll be all right.
Mistake.
What was his claim to fame? What good thing did he do that was recorded here that's mentioned?
oh, he rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord.
What do you think that might have been about?
Well, probably the temple was falling apart, I would imagine. Probably needed structural work.
I think he went with maybe religious reforms, so he was followed the priesthood, or so he was not seemed like he followed the ways of the Lord, not completely, but
He still didn't remove the high places.
nobody did.
And
Only the
nobody,
king.
every time the southern king,
Nobody, no.
Now, was Hezekiah 2 kings they did? We don't get there yet. Hezekiah and Josiah are the ones so 39 kings altogether, 20 Judah and 19 Israel, 2. So 37 never taken.
thank you. So jump over for a minute, we got a further description of Jotham, there's some important things, information about his life and his influence. In 2 Kings, chapter 27, Second Chronicles, sorry, chapter 27. And I'd like us to read, I think, the first 6 verses.
Which,
27, chapter
71.
27, verses 1 through 6.
Went through what?
1 through 6.
Oh, what's
your-
27.
Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Uzziah had done. But unlike him, he did not enter the temple of the Lord. The people, however, continued their corrupt practices. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord and did extensive work on the wall at the hill of Ophel. He built towns in the hill country of Judah and forts and towers in the wooded areas. Jotham waged war against the king of the Ammonites and conquered them. That year, the Ammonites paid him 100 talents of silver, 10,000 cores of wheat, and 10,000 cores of barley. The Ammonites brought him the same amount also in the 2nd and 3rd years. Jotham grew powerful because he walked steadfastly before the Lord his God. And other events in Jotham's reign, including all his wars and the other things he did, are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Jotham rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David, and Ahaz his son succeeded him as king.
He died fairly young, like 25 and 16 as well. 41. So he was 41 when he died. But what was his key to success?
Military might.
No, he walked steadfastly before the Lord.
As it described here, he walked steadfastly before the Lord.
He was reigning with his father, so he saw what happened to his father, and he recognized the limitations.
That's a good point, George.
You know,
Yeah.
just-
There we go.
He saw a bad example and said, don't do that. And, but in other areas, he followed his father.
mm.
What does it mean to walk steadfastly before the Lord? I mean, think of your own life.
Well,
How would you describe that, you know? Or how would you describe somebody else? What would their behavior be like if they were walking steadfastly with the Lord?
more of a love your neighbor kind of thing, like Jesus wanted us to do.
Part of it, sure. What
You
else?
know, communicate with him, talk to God, or through whoever it was he was talking to, seek his advice, and do it exactly how he said.
Not-
Obey the edicts of the Lord, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
A relationship with God,
It
not
says
when
he
things are
walked-
bad or good all the
It says he
time.
walked steadfastly. What is that image? What is that?
Means there's gonna be ups and downs,
Mm.
and, you know, we're not always gonna sense God's presence, but he's there, just hang on. And life is a bumpy bus ride.
It sounds like he was always in communication with God, always in prayer, probably daily.
I mean, it's a bit like the title of this book, Lifelong Faith. Not just faith in a moment or in an emotion for a period of time, but over a long haul, steady, walking, following the Lord, in spite of the failures and stumbles, pursuing, being obedient and faithful, you know?
Also was the time of the prophet Isaiah. We don't mention here, but was the one he spoke in the one this Jotham, Uzziah, and Hezekiah. So yeah, Isaiah was at this time was a prophet in Jerusalem. So, but in the book of Kings of Chronicles don't mention or if he interceded for this kingdom. He mentioned a lot of when you get to Hezekiah and and the other, he died when, I think after he died when the son of Hezekiah, what do you call it, was the evil king, what is his name?
Here it says Micah.
No, he's not the one, Manasseh.
Yeah.
Manasseh was he born when Hezekiah was, he asked the Lord to give a few more years, 14 more years, 15. So he born in that time, whatever his father will, he destroy everything. So it was,
I guess that's my prayer for myself, that I might walk steadfastly with the Lord to the end. You know, it's how you finish, to finish well, isn't that your heart's desire, and wouldn't you want that on your gravestone?
Keep
You
your
finish
eye on
well.
the prize.
Yeah, you finish well. And what helps us, we talked a little bit, you would suggest, but what helps you walk steadfastly? What have you found that is particularly?
For me, when I ask for that help, when things are getting bumpy, and I take the time to listen and pay attention and hear God's word, however it may be spoken through others, or, for me, that's steadfast persistence, but it's persistence in the face of obstacles. For me, that's the way I experience it.
Community and support, but it's a community of God's people.
Yeah,
And don't lose faith when things aren't going well. Just believe that God will get you out of the situation.
worst
Okay.
thing is quit, you know, that you want to move away from the Lord on bad things. That's a lot of, we see the whole, I see this congregation for 20-something years, people, when the things they come bad or something, or the other way around. What happened in this place is the other way around. They survive on things, they go bad and rough. When the Lord starts blessing them, that's more the other when money and everything we start succeeding is more easy to we live with the Lord than when the things are pretty rough.
Well, and I would say this, I mean, it's easy to say I try and walk with the Lord, but if I don't know what walking with the Lord means, then it's a bunch of words. And, you know, we all walk a different path, but every Monday night, we're on the same path, and we talk about it. And
I
then
think it's gotta be-
then we leave and come back to this path.
It's gotta be in here, you know,
Yeah.
I'm saying you have to feel it inside that you're doing the right thing. I mean, we know right from wrong. We don't always do everything right, but when we do something wrong, we know it's wrong. And then we just, repent and try to do the right thing.
I agree with Jeff. I don't think it's as simple as, black or white, an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. I think that sitting here wrestling with God's word to find out, I mean, you don't kill people, that's duh. But there are a lot of other things that you really have to dig deeply to figure out what exactly God would want
that's right.
me to do.
That's a good point. There's some hard choices, tough choices that come our way. I think it's, someone described a section as, I forget what psalm it was referred to, it's one of the Psalms of Ascent. Eugene Peterson, but he talked of obedience, a long obedience in the same direction. That's how I would describe it, a long obedience in the same direction. And some of the people that you know who have passed away in the last couple of years have lived a life and they have continued that obedience in the same direction right to the end. And, that's a
Good
challenge.
definition of faith, man. It's a good definition of faith.
Yeah,
Long obedience,
in the
that's
same-
what it is.
in the same
Sometimes it's
direction.
hard to maintain that faith, but
It is, yeah.
you have to keep on coming back.
That's
May I
right.
The
throw out-
pilgrimage, like Paul's playing very good in the second Timothy chapter 4 about finishing the race. You see, is doesn't matter. Sometimes you start bad, like one of those. You start in the other side of the coin and finish well. And the real, it's like a marathon now. These the Olympics, Doesn't matter if you start first or later. Well, matter who's gonna finish the race. to persevere until the end. We face challenge, but while all the Lord more, the strength, you move from strength to strength, and those years in the young years in the faith are dangerous, very easy to wait and when you go with the Lord for a long time, you look back over the Lord already, then through our life, and you have like a testimony, on in the mountains and the valleys, and if the Lord deliver us from this problem, so we can do it again or whatever, allow that for a purpose. Sometimes even we don't know what kind of.
May I throw out one last
Sure.
comment?
Sure.
It doesn't apply so much in this country, but there's a piece of music by Handel called Zadok the Priest. If you go back through the coronations to George II, it was played every single time. If you ever look at the last night of the proms in London, which would be in September if you were looking them up, they play Zadok the Priest. It's a very classic piece of music. But what it reminds me of when I listen to all this music is these were people who in Reformation times, maybe a little later, wrote and played music to glorify their God. And some other, I'm going to call them sectarian administrations, picked them up, but still used the music that was played to the glory of God. So I think part of that, when I talk about community, part of that also goes back generations. It still has an effect on me.
I think helps in walking steadfastly come from an older source. I mean, as several have said, from the community of faith of believers, from regular attendance and participation. But also it has to come from your own, feeding your own soul too. Finding a way of day to day of getting into God's word and somehow feeding yourself. That's so important. Being accountable to others, being open and honest with a friend, saying, I'm struggling, help me. I'm lost here. What do I do? And I think, trusting the Lord and obeying, repenting when you fail, all those things contribute, don't they, to walking steadfastly. So, when we get up tomorrow morning, say, okay, today, Lord, today, I want to walk steadfastly in the way of the Lord. That's a good prayer to start your day. Okay, let's go on to chapter 16. And there's much more here about Ahaz. Now it's 735 BC, and we're in the southern kingdom now. And so let's just read through the verse 9 of chapter 16.
Sure. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of Jotham, the king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king and reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He walked in the ways of the kings of Israel and even sacrificed his son in the fire, following the detestable ways of the nations of the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places on the hilltops and under every spreading tree. Then Rezin, king of Aram, and
Syria,
Pekah.
right?
Okay. Was that enough?
No, keep going.
Okay. Rezin, son of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz, but they could not overpower him. At that time, Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath for Aram by driving out the men of Judah. Edomites then moved into Elah and have lived there to this day. Ahaz sent messengers to say, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Aram and out of the hand of the king of Israel, who are attacking me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus and capturing it. He deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death.
Okay, let's talk about one. So what's going on here?
Guy's a real screw up.
It's collapsing.
So overall, what's Ahaz's rating on the godly versus ungodly list?
Not very good.
Everything bad.
Yeah. And it's interesting, here we see a person who did not follow the ways of his parents. Others did follow in the ways, but he didn't. It's a challenge raising godly children, godly grandchildren. And so it says he became king when he was 20 years old. What were you doing when you were 20 years old? Can you imagine that kind of responsibility?
I don't remember.
Were you a grunt in Vietnam about that time?
Yes, this is the thoughts I've been having. I might be way out of line.
No.
But at 20 years old, you're so full of testosterone.
Yeah.
It's all you think you know it all. Why do you think they had all these problems? Why didn't they elect someone that had some knowledge, had some experience in the world? No, they pick a young kid that, I'm gonna rule the world. Over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's a good question. Remember, this is succession. A king has a son, and the son succeeds the father, and then it goes on. The
When it
family
gets
line.
old enough,
So it
with
wasn't
sense.
a general election. They should have had one, but they didn't. It was just succession of the dynasty line.
Yeah, but we can't compare a 20-year-old of then to a 20-year-old today. I mean, they were a lot more mature at 20 back then than they are today.
No, they couldn't have been. I mean, look at what they were doing.
We don't even let our kids climb trees for crying out loud.
This is the king of the Lord that.
I disagree with you, Fred.
Asked him, ask for me for a sign. He was yes, and he said, I'm not gonna give the Lord our God, and the sign of the Blessed Virgin Mary was fulfilled, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son. So it's from in the time of King Ahaz,
That's right.
in the Isaiah chapter 7, and in the time of he was born.
So it's sad, isn't it? I mean, what influenced King Ahaz? What was his primary influence? Verse 3.
Yeah, he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, so he was influenced by the kings up north, and he even sacrificed his son.
That Moloch was the god where they had a fire, and then it was like a cauldron kettle, and they would take the infant and put it on that as a sacrifice, hoping this is the ultimate sacrifice, and surely God would do what they want now, or protect. So what is his strategy for protecting his kingdom? Because there's a threat. Understand that Assyria is over here, and that's the elephant in the room. In the meantime, there's Syria, and then there's the northern kingdom, Israel, and they are vassal states under Assyria. And so they said, let's get together, let's force Judah into an alliance. So all three of us, we've got some clout then, and hopefully we can hold off Assyria from its threats. And so Aram, that is Syria, and the northern kingdom, Israel, they attacked Judah because Judah wasn't gonna play ball. So what is Judah's, the southern kingdom, what's their strategy for getting out of this mess?
Raid the temple and pay him off.
Who do they look to for help?
Syria.
Syria. And so they said, they paid money, it was sort of what do you call that, when you hire mercenaries? It was they asked Syria to get after Syria and the northern kingdom to defeat them, to take the pressure off of Judah. And so instead of, what was wrong with this strategy, or what went right with it for a while?
First of all, it's wrong is one of the people of Israel attacked, because Ephraim allied So I think it's over in 732 was, so the tribe of Ephraim and, or the northern kingdom showed they ally with Syria to fight Judah. So like brothers, go against their, you know.
So basically, Judah, in offering money to Assyria to attack its threat, the northern kingdom of Syria and Israel, they in effect became a vassal state under Assyria. They were beholden to them. And so in verse 10, let's just read this and then we'll finish. Read 10 down through 14.
Then the king Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tilgath-Pilneser, king of Assyria. He saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar with detailed plans for its construction. So Uriah the priest built an altar in accordance with the plans that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus, and finished it before King Ahaz returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered up his burnt offerings and grain offerings, poured out his drink offering, and splashed the blood of his fellowship offerings against the altar. As for the bronze altar that stood before the Lord, he brought it from the front of the temple, from between the new altar and the temple of the Lord, and put it in the north side of the new altar.
Go ahead and read the next couple of verses now, just through 15 through 16.
King Ahaz then gave these orders to Uriah the priest. On the large new altar, offer the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering, the king's burnt offering and his grain offering, and the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering. Splash against this altar the blood of all the burnt offerings and sacrifices, but I will use the bronze altar for seeking guidance. And Uriah the priest did just as King Ahaz had ordered.
So what's happening here? What is King Ahaz in effect doing?
He's getting sick of the old way of doing religion, so he's gonna do his own and had a much more deluxe designerly altar made. Yeah, the finest designers in the world come up with a new plan.
That's a good insight, Larry, yeah. What in effect is he taking on himself? What,
Again, the rule of a
So
priest, try
priest.
and move all the way the temple, the things are working in the temple. No, I'm gonna change all of
yeah,
them.
he says, yeah, new rules for the game, guys.
Yeah.
You know, he sets himself up as the spiritual authority. I mean, God had ordained a way of approaching him, of worship, the sacrificial system, and Ahaz was in effect saying, it's okay, but I got something better.
Yeah.
And he took the pattern of what he saw in Assyria, and brought it back and introduced it, and then rearranged the furniture of the tabernacle.
Yeah, and then the chief priest just said, yes, boss, I'll do anything you say.
Exactly. So this Uriah, not the Uriah that David, was Bathsheba's husband, and he eliminated, but this Uriah complied. Yes, sir.
But then it says, but the bronze altar shall be for me to inquire by. So he didn't really throw the bronze altar out altogether.
No, just kept but changed the functions. And so, the last couple of verses, it says, he cut off the side panels and removed the basins from the movable stands, he removed the sea, that was this big, container of water for washing the sacrifices and so forth. And, he took away the Sabbath canopy that had been built at the temple, removed the royal entryway, he just reassembled the furniture. And then it says in 19, as for the other events of the reign of Ahaz and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the king? He rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David. And thank God he had a son with his head screwed on right. And his son's name is what?
Hezekiah.
Hezekiah. We'll read about him. And he's one of the Old Testament heroes. And as Joe said, Isaiah. Same period of time. And he was one of the major prophets that was speaking to the southern kingdom at this time. Other prophets up north were speaking to Israel before they Amos and various other ones. So we'll pick it up next week.
This kind of reminds me, when I was a little kid in the Catholic Church, changed everything around on the altar. They reversed the side that the priest would serve on and made a lot of different changes. I think they even changed from Latin to English.
Well, they changed the altar from being against the wall like this to coming out.
Yeah, the Roman
They
Catholic.
changed, you know,
Was that done with the Episcopals as well?
And isn't the instruction really careful because it's a reflection of what's going on in the heavens? And so as the king steps in and does this, he's perverting and twisting the reflection.
God gave that model to Moses, the way those people, all the measurements, we have a replica today in the south of Israel. So we're very clear the way they got to see the sheep.
The tabernacle goes up and George was designed by God, and we're reminded of what the Hebrews, that he's talking about the tabernacle and the ark and everything. These were, be careful to fashion them after the design in heaven. And so, that, it was a God-given design, and each part had a purpose. And for someone to come in and just shuffle the deck and say, now, rearrange the furniture, that was a major violation.
Dale, I'm trying to look at the big picture.
Okay?
We have all these kings, king after king after king playing all their games. But these are kingdoms of lives. And I have to wonder, is God giving them the kings that they deserve? Or is he waiting for them to turn their tune so that they get the king they deserve? But we sit here and we say, well, don't worry about anything today because God's in charge. Well, maybe God's trying to say, yeah, get up off your butt and go change society and I'll give you what you
I
deserve.
think it's both.
You know what I mean? I'm just throwing it out there.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, just, you think about situations, it's like, why does God allow that? We're working in cooperation with him, you know what I mean? He allows so many different things. And then there's opportunities, like you say, for us to step up to the plate, and then he can lead and guide us.
I think that part of, you say, why did it go on and on and on and on, and so many human lives were caught? At the same time, there was a godly remnant of people, believers in the northern kingdom. And God, his heart's desire was that they would repent and turn back to him. And he sent prophets, Elijah and Elisha. They were primary prophets to the north. And others, Amos and Hosea and so forth, were prophets to the north. And so God, God gives every chance possible for us, for people to come to know him. He's not willing that any should perish. We're reminded by Peter. So I think that, it's God's mercy, his patience is part of it. At the same time, they did get what they deserved. You reap what you sow. And both of these are play, as he said, it's complicated. It's not either or, it's both and. It's human choice and
I think to our free will, he gives us the opportunity to, do the right thing or not do the right thing.
That's right.
And when we do the wrong thing, we suffer the consequences. And when we do the right thing, we reap the rewards.
Yeah. Okay, any prayer requests as we come to a close?